Eric's axe strikes the oak post for the fourth time. The wood sinks 5 centimeters into the frozen earth. His hands, cracked since October, bleed again. He has spent more than half his life building shelters that do not last. But this one will not last. This one will be different. His neighbor already told him he is crazy for trying. The other men of the settlement stopped helping him 2 weeks ago. In Trelleborg, everyone builds like this now. But here, 150 kilometers to the north, nobody understands it. Eric drives another post. The circle has to be perfect. Because when the real winter arrives, the difference between dying and waking will be the shape of these walls. The previous winter killed 7 people in Eric's village. 4 children, 2 elders, a woman who gave birth during the worst storm and did not survive the delivery. The rectangular houses where they lived had wooden walls and wattle, roofs of straw with corners where the wind accumulated and penetrated with a force that no fire could counteract. Eric remembers the sound of those nights, the howl of the wind hitting the corners of his house, searching for weak points, always finding them. Right angles are traps for the cold. The wind collides with one wall, turns at the corner, creates turbulence that sucks the heat from inside like an invisible pump. This morning, Eric walks through the village observing his neighbors' houses. Rectangles 15 meters long by 8 wide, walls 20 centimeters thick. Roofs that lose heat through every crack between the beams. In a normal winter, these structures work. In a winter like the one coming, they will not. Astrid finds him next to the field where he plans to build. His wife has her arms crossed against the morning cold. Her eyes narrowed, evaluating the empty ground. The others say you are crazy. The others lost children last winter, Eric replies. Astrid says nothing more. Both know that one of those children was her nephew. 3 years old. Frozen in his bed while the fire burned less than 2 meters away. The heat did not reach the corners of the room where he slept. Eric takes out the plan he has drawn on a piece of tanned leather. A circle divided into 4 quadrants by perpendicular streets. 4 houses in each quadrant. 16 in total, oriented toward a central courtyard. A circular embankment surrounding the entire complex with 4 gates aligned with the cardinal points. The circle has no corners. He explains. The wind finds nowhere to accumulate. It hits the curved wall and slides along it. The same wall that defends us from enemies defends us from the cold. Astrid studies the drawing. Her fingers trace the circular perimeter, the inner houses, the streets that cross at the center. How many people do you need to build this? The whole village or half the village working double. Nobody's going to work on something they consider madness. Eric puts away the drawing. He looks north where the clouds gather over the mountains with a density that promises storms. He has 8 weeks before winter arrives with all its force. 8 weeks to convince enough people to help him and to cut the wood necessary to move the earth that will form the embankment. And if he does not succeed, his family will face the cold in a rectangular house like all the others, with the same chances of losing someone as the previous winter. The first man who agrees to help is Thorbal the village blacksmith. He does it not out of conviction, but because he owes Eric 3 months of work for a horse he never paid for. But a worker is a worker. Together, they begin to trace the circle. The technique is simple, but requires precision. A central post, a rope 68 meters long, and measured steps that keep the tension constant while Eric walks in a circle driving stakes every 2 meters. The resulting perimeter has almost 500 meters of circumference. It is enormous, says Thorbal, looking at the layout. How are you going to raise a wall around all this? With the earth we excavate from the ditch. The ditch is the key to the system. 17 meters wide, 4 deep. Dug in a pronounced V-shape that makes any crossing attempt difficult. The extracted earth, more than 30,000 cubic meters, becomes the embankment that surrounds the interior. Every shovelful of earth that comes out of the ditch is a shovelful that rises to the wall. The first days are brutal. Eric and Thorbal work alone, digging a ditch that seems infinite with tools that seem inadequate. Eric's hands fill with blisters that burst and fill again. His shoulders burn after each workday. The progress is visible but insufficient. On the third day, another man appears with a shovel. He says nothing. He simply starts digging beside them. On the fifth day, there are 6. On the 8th, 12. Not all come out of conviction. Some come because they observed the clouds from the north and recognized the signs. Others because they lost family members the previous winter and do not want to repeat the experience. Some simply have nothing better to do. But the work advances. The embankment grows centimeter by centimeter. Earth compacted in layers reinforced with horizontal wooden beams every 1.5 meters of height. The technique is not Eric's invention. He saw it in a southern fortress during a trade trip years ago. A circular structure built with mathematical precision, inhabited by hundreds of people. That had withstood decades of storms and attacks without showing signs of weakness. King Harald built fortresses like that. He tells Thorvald while they work, 4 in all of Denmark. Perfect circles with walls 6 meters high. The largest housed 3,000 people. We are not King Harald, but the cold kills kings and farmers alike. At the end of the 3rd week, the embankment reaches 2 meters in height in the most advanced sections. The ditch has almost 1 meter of depth on average. The progress is real, tangible, visible from any point in the village. But it is not enough. 5 weeks remain until winter. The embankment needs to reach at least 5 meters to fulfill its function as a barrier against the wind. The inner houses do not exist yet. They have not even cut the wood to build them. And the clouds from the north approach every day, bringing the promise of storms that will not wait for Eric to finish his work. Eric's race against winter is only beginning to show its obstacles. If you want to discover how he faces the arrival of the cold with a half-built fortress, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. What comes next will change the way you understand Viking engineering. The first snowfall arrives 3 weeks earlier than expected. Eric wakes to the sound of silence. That particular silence that only snow creates, absorbing every noise from the outside world. And he immediately knows the plans have changed. He leaves his rectangular house, the house he still inhabits with his family, and observes the transformed landscape. 5 centimeters of snow cover everything. The half-built embankment appears like a white serpent that surrounds the inner space. 3 meters high in the completed sections, barely 1.5 meters in the most delayed ones. The gates do not exist yet. The inner houses are only marks on the ground. The other workers arrive one by one, evaluating the situation with faces that reflect the same concern. The early snow means the winter will be worse than anticipated. It also means the construction time has been drastically reduced. We change the plan, says Eric. We cannot finish everything, but we can finish enough. The new plan abandons the idea of 16 inner houses. Instead, they will build 4, 1 in each quadrant, enough to shelter the families who want to take refuge inside the circle. The embankment will be completed only on the north and west sides, the ones facing the dominant winds. The gates will be simple openings instead of elaborate structures. The work intensifies. 20 people now working from dawn until the light disappears. The wood they cut for 16 houses is concentrated on 4, allowing stronger, more insulated, more resistant structures. The inner houses have a shape that no neighbor recognizes. Curves instead of rectangles with walls that arch like the hull of an inverted ship, 29 meters long. 8 wide in the center, narrowing at the ends. The design is not an aesthetic whim. It is physics applied to survival. Why curves? Asks one of the workers while they place the outer posts inclined outward. Eric demonstrates with his hands. A straight wall receives the wind head-on, all the impact in one point. A curved wall distributes the force, diverts it to the sides. Less pressure, less infiltration, less heat loss. The same principle applies inside. The low roof, barely 2.5 meters at the center, reduces the volume of air that needs to be heated. The central hearth, rectangular and delimited with stones, radiates heat toward the side benches where the families will sleep. The curved ends of each house function as storage chambers and as thermal transition zones. Every element has a purpose. Every curve, every angle, every dimension responds to a specific problem of heat conservation. Astrid works alongside Eric in the house that will be theirs. Their children help carrying materials, holding posts while the adults bury them. It is family work in the most literal sense, building the space where they will survive or die together. The second snowfall arrives when the 4 houses have complete walls but half-finished roofs. The cold increases every night. The embankment on the north side reaches 5 meters in height, the one on the west 4. It is imperfect, incomplete, but it is something. Eric looks at the half-built houses, the irregular embankment, the openings without doors through which the wind can still enter. He knows it is not enough. He also knows it is more than he had the previous winter. The question he cannot answer is whether the difference will be enough to save his family when the real storm arrives. The storm arrives in the first week of December. It is not a common storm. It is the kind of phenomenon that the elders remember from their youth and that the young only know from stories. Winds that exceed 100 kilometers per hour. Temperatures that drop to 30 degrees below zero. Snow that falls horizontally for days without pause. Eric is inside the circular house with his family when the wind begins to roar. Astrid holds the smallest 3-year-old against her chest. The 2 older ones, 8 and 11, sit by the central hearth with wide eyes. The fire burns with all the intensity they can give it. Outside, the world disappears in a white whirlwind of snow and wind. Inside, something extraordinary happens. The heat remains. The curved walls of the house divert the wind to the sides instead of receiving it head-on. The 5-meter embankment surrounding the enclosure blocks the most intense gusts before they reach the inner structures. The low roof keeps the warm air close to the ground where the people are. The central hearth radiates heat toward the side benches with an efficiency that Eric had not experienced before. The outside temperature drops to 32 degrees below zero according to the signs Eric knows. Water freezes instantly on contact with the air. Breath forms crystals before dissipating. Metal burns bare skin in seconds. The inside temperature remains at 10 degrees above zero. 42 degrees of difference. In a traditional rectangular house under the same outside conditions, the difference would be 20 degrees at most. Eric's family would be shivering next to a fire that does not warm them, burning double the fuel to get half the heat. Here inside the circle, the children sleep. Astrid rests reclining against the benches that line the walls. The fire consumes half the firewood it would consume in another structure. But outside in the rectangular houses of the village, the story is different. Eric will know it later when the storm ends. The wind found every corner, every crack, every structural weakness. The families who did not take refuge in the circle spent sleepless nights feeding fires that were not enough, losing animals that died frozen in insufficient stables. Nobody died this time, but the margin was narrow. When the storm ends on the 5th day, Eric leaves the circular shelter and observes the transformed landscape. The snow reaches 1.5 meters in some areas. The embankment they built appears like a white wall that surrounds a space where the snow is lower, where the wind did not accumulate the same deposits as outside. The neighbors emerge from their rectangular houses with faces that tell stories of sleepless nights, of cold that penetrated to the bones, of fear that no fire could dispel. One of them approaches Eric. It is the same man who mocked when he saw the circle traced on the ground weeks ago. "How was it inside?" he asks. "Warm," Eric replies. "My children slept all night." The man looks at the embankment, the curved houses that peek over the wall, the protected space that Eric and the others built with their own hands. He says nothing, no need. His face says everything that needs to be said, but the winter is not over. This was the first storm of many that will come. And the question everyone is asking now is whether the circle has enough space for more families, whether the structure can be expanded before the next blast of cold arrives. The second month of winter brings 3 more storms, none as severe as the first, but all intense enough to test the village structures. And by the 3rd storm, 12 more families have joined the circle. The 4 inner houses designed to house 50 people each now contain 70. It is tight, It is uncomfortable. But nobody dies of cold. Eric observes the transformation from the center of the enclosure. The space that seemed excessive when he traced it now seems calculated with precision. The 200 square meters of each curved house allow families to share body heat without crushing each other. The central courtyards of each quadrant function as transition spaces where snow is stored to melt and where the children play during the calm hours between storms. The embankment, although incomplete, fulfills its function. The 5 meters on the north side block the worst winds. The 4 meters on the west side reduce the gusts that enter through the doorless openings. Even the 2-meter sections provide some protection, breaking the force of the wind before it reaches the houses. What Eric built is not perfect. The circular fortresses he saw in the south had complete walls of 6 meters, elaborate gates with 17-meter-long tunnels, wooden palisades crowning each section of the embankment. In comparison, his circle is rudimentary, improvised, barely functional, but it works. And the temperatures inside the enclosure remain consistently 15 to 20 degrees warmer than in the rectangular houses of the village. Fuel consumption is almost half. The diseases that prolonged cold usually brings coughs, fevers, respiratory infections appear less frequently and with less severity. The numbers speak with a clarity that no argument could match. The previous winter, 7 dead. This winter, none. When spring finally arrives, melting the accumulated snow and revealing the damp earth below, Eric calls a meeting in the center of the circle. All who took refuge there during the winter attend. Also some who stayed in their rectangular houses. Next summer we're going to finish what we started, he says. The complete embankment, the 4 gates, the missing houses. By next winter everything will be ready. Nobody argues. Nobody proposes alternatives. The experience of the last months has turned skeptics into believers. In the following years, Eric's circle will grow. More inner houses, more families taking refuge inside the walls during the cold months. The embankment will finally reach 6 meters in height along its entire perimeter. The gates will have long tunnels that trap the cold before it reaches the interior. Eric did not build the first circular fortress in history, but he built the one that saved his family, and that is all he needed to do. The last image of winter is Eric standing in the center of the circle, looking at the curved houses he raised with his own hands, the embankment he dug with his neighbors, the protected space where his children slept while the wind howled outside. The circle is not magic. It is geometry. It is physics. It is the understanding that nature cannot be defeated, but it can be surrounded, diverted, survived. It is the oldest and simplest refuge in the world. A circle that encloses heat while the cold searches for entrances that do not exist. What Eric built in 8 weeks of desperate work was not just a refuge. It was the practical demonstration of a principle that modern engineering took centuries to formalize. That curved shapes distribute forces better than angular ones. That closed systems conserve heat better than open ones. That geometry can be the difference between living and dying, but the refuge was only one part of the Viking survival system. The tools they used to build, hunt, fight also had secrets that modern science is only beginning to understand. In the next episode, we will discover the incredible metal that the Vikings used for their weapons and tools, a material that did not rust like common iron, that kept its edge after years of use, that archaeologists found intact in tombs more than 1,000 years old. If you want to discover the metallurgical secret that made the Viking expansion possible, subscribe and turn on the bell. The story continues.